evening, commissioners and WRT and city staff.
Good evening.
Good afternoon, Chair McCoy. How are you?
I'm good. Just trying to get the little one settled for homework, and you know how it goes.
Never a dull moment.
Never a dull moment. Correct, Commissioner Barraza.
All right. Well, just so you know, Chair McCoy, we have Commissioner Parks in attendance, and we are ready when you are.
Thank you. I now call this meeting of the Parks, Recreation, and Arts Commission to order. With the city clerk, please call the roll.
Yes. Commissioner Parks?
Here.
Commissioner Barraza?
President,
Commissioner Singh is here in attendance. Commissioner Cummings?
Here.
Commissioner Apuda?
Here.
Commissioner Vang?
Here.
And Chair McCoy?
Present.
And then just a note really quickly, Vice Chair Dolan and Commissioner Miller will not be in attendance today. Also, for the members of the public, I just got a notice that we are on Zoom. We are live on Facebook through CMAC. But if anybody from the community is trying to view this meeting through Granicus, our website on the city portal, we are a little bit behind. So we are live on CMAC, we are live on Zoom, and we are live on Facebook.
Thank you. We will now begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. Would everyone please stand? Ready, salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. We will start with the approval of the agenda. Secretary, are there any changes to the agenda?
There were no reported changes to the agenda.
Okay, and any proposed changes to the agenda? None as well?
There are no proposed changes on our end.
Okay. Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
Motion, Commissioner Vang.
Thank you, Commissioner Vang. Is there a second?
I'll second, Commissioner Parks.
Thank you, Commissioner Parks. Secretary, please conduct a roll call vote.
Yes. Commissioner Parks?
Yes.
Commissioner Barraza?
yes.
Commissioner Singh?
Yes.
Commissioner Cummings?
Yes.
Commissioner Apuda?
Yes.
Commissioner Vang?
Yes.
Chair McCoy?
Yes. We will now move on to approval of minutes. Are there any changes to the minutes of January 10th, 2022 meeting?
There were no changes on the city clerk's end.
Thank you. Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
I'll make the motion. This is Commissioner Cummings.
Thank you, Commissioner Cummings. Is there a second?
I'll second. This is Commissioner Parks.
Thank you, Commissioner Parks. Secretary, please conduct a roll call vote, please.
Yes. Commissioner Parks?
Yes.
Commissioner Barraza?
Yes.
Commissioner Singh?
Yes.
Commissioner Cummings?
Yes.
Commissioner Apuda?
Yes.
Commissioner Vang?
Yes.
Chair McCoy?
Yes. We will now move on to subcommittee reports. This item is a discussion item for the commission and no public comments will be taken related to this item. Does the Cultural Arts Plan Subcommittee have an update it would like to provide to this commission?
I don't have any updates. Sarah, is there any updates on your end? Commissioner Parks, I'm sorry.
No updates for me.
Thank you.
Thank you. Does the Highest Needs Neighborhood Subcommittee have an update it would like to provide to this commission? We do not have any updates at this time. Does the Parks Master Plan Subcommittee have an update it would like to provide to this commission?
Not that we're aware of, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner Barraza. We will now move on to members' report and comments. As a reminder, this is a time for commission members to report anything they feel important for the public or commission to know, but it's not time for a discussion. Commissioner Cummings, do you have any reports or comments to make to the commission?
No, I do not. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Barraza, do you have any reports or comments?
I do not. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner Barraza. Commissioner Vang, do you have any reports or comments?
No reports, thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Vang. Dr. Apuda, do you have any reports or comments?
I do not, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Apuda. Commissioner Parks, do you have any reports or comments?
Not tonight, thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Parks. Commissioner Singh, do you have any reports or comments?
Yes, I do actually. Just want to give a huge shout out to all the high school volunteers from SHSS that went neighborhood by neighborhood and asked folks to take the park survey, knowing how important it was. So just want to give a huge shout out to them. Thank you all.
Thank you, Commissioner Singh. Shout out to them for helping us get that survey circulated. We will now move on to city administration and park staff reports and comments. Does anyone from the administration have any reports or comments for this commission?
Not tonight, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone from the park staff have any reports or comments for the commission?
Hi, Aldi Ramirez, Parks Assistant Director. I would just like to echo the thank you for all the outreach related to the survey. You will hear in tonight's presentation by WRT that we've received close to 900 responses to that survey. So very, very much thankful for all of your help related to outreach.
Thank you, Aldi. We will now move on to unscheduled communication. Would any member of the public like to speak on any issue within the jurisdiction of this commission? You will have 3 minutes.
Chair McCoy, there are no members of the community in the chambers that wish to speak, and there are no members via Zoom that wish to speak.
Thank you. We will now move on to workshops. As a reminder to the public, workshops are for informational purposes only, and there will be no public comment period. Measure P funds, Parks Department. Would a member of the Parks Department please begin the workshop?
Yes, let me just share my screen. Can you all see that?
Yes.
Great.
Yes.
So again, Aldi Ramirez, Parks Assistant Director. Thank you all for allowing me the opportunity to update you on Measure P funded capital projects. This is the regular update Park staff is providing related to projects that were approved in the fiscal year 22 budget and the status of those. So just as a reminder for the process, this is the projects process that each of the projects goes through, and the purpose for having item number 3 crossed out is because these projects are funded by Measure P, so we do not need to go through the identify funding source stage. So I am excited to show you this slide tonight. There are a lot more projects crossed off here than we first started with you all months ago. So as you can see, this slide identifies projects that are in essentially the stage where you identify them, you define what they're going to be, and then you scope them. So as you can see on here, of the 9 projects that were on this list, all but 1 has been completed through this stage and moved on to a different stage in the project process. So the only project still existing on this slide is the El Dorado Park Expansion Project, and the city is currently in negotiations with the folks related to what that expansion would look like. So this project will stay on this slide until the scoping is defined, and then the project can move on. Next step in the project process is estimating the project cost. So as you can see here, we have had 3 projects move on from this, and then we have had an additional 6 come onto this slide. So the first up here is the Logan Improvements. We've submitted a request to the Public Works Department in their Facilities Division, and they're currently putting together an estimate related to what those Logan improvements would cost. Those Logan improvements include painting, updates to the benches, the trash cans, etc. So right now, Public Works is getting a cost estimate together for us so then we can move forward in the project. The second project on here is the Radka Irrigation improvements. I didn't move this project down a slide because technically it isn't yet in the next phase. It's kind of stuck in the middle between the two. So we've already estimated the project cost, and we're just getting the consultant agreement underway. So it's not yet in design, so I didn't want to move it ahead too fast. But next step will be design for that project. As you can see, projects 3, 4, and 5 are all crossed out here because they've been completed. Moving down to project 6 on this slide, we have the Herndon Milburn upgrades. Again, at the estimating project cost stage of the project, so we've requested that cost proposal from Public Works, and they are currently putting that together. So in the meantime, staff has met on site at that park location with the council member and kind of walked the site and looked at the needs out there, done a job walk, and now we're getting to the part where we're going to estimate the project cost. And then after that, we'll get into design and then community input. Moving down to project 7, the Citywide Senior Center. So we're currently in the stage of acquisition. Again, I didn't want to move this down to the design phase because it's a little premature for that. But we are in the position to acquire property related to the senior center and moving through those property negotiations. Once that property is purchased, and then we'll move forward with a design consultant, and it will move slides down to the design phase. The next project on here is the trash collection standardization project, and Parks has been working really hard to ensure that we have, and you guys have all heard, consistency among things like benches, trash cans, some of the amenities throughout the park. So one of those was the trash collection process and standardization for what those look like. And so we've been talking to different vendors and really getting an understanding of what they offer versus what we need, right? So we've learned some things throughout the year, whether that's, hey, open trash cans without a covering don't work because then the trash gets soaked when the rain, just key learnings that we've learned. We're talking to the different vendors to see what spec will work for us, and that way we can take that and be able to bid it out and allow other manufacturers the opportunity to essentially put forward what they have. So that's where we're at with that project. And then project number 9, Milburn in Dakota. This is one of our Prop 68 projects. We did receive notification that we were awarded this project. And so I didn't want to move it down to design just yet, as we're needing to get the agreement codified with the state and working through that approval process with them. On to the design phase. So there are 8 projects that are currently in the queue here. We have JSK Tot Lot. This is currently in design and is looking to go out to bid in April and hoping for construction the beginning of summer 2022, pending that everything as far as when we bid goes well. Second project on here is the Roding Park dog relocation. This project is currently in design, but it has some environmental components that are waiting to be completed. So we've halted design and then allowing that environmental, essentially the public comment period to run out on that before we pick back up on the 90% design plans. Project number 3 on here, the Pillowbows Turf and Irrigation improvements. This project is in design. It's currently at 50%, so halfway through design here and working through the rest of that design. Project number 4 on here is the Van Ness Triangle project. Again, similar situation to Roding. We are in the design, so going through the different amenities. We've had some community meetings, but then we're also running the environmental assessment along the same path. Project number 5 is the Woodward Park Amphitheater Shade Structure Project. This project, the co-op agreement went to council this last meeting in January. It was moved to the next meeting in January, which is January 27th. So that co-op agreement will be on for council's approval on January 27th, which will then allow the project to move forward. Project number 6 on this slide is the Granny's Park security lighting. This project is currently in the consultant agreement and insurance phase, and then once that agreement is signed and the insurance is on file, we will move forward with the design of that security lighting project. And then we have Maxi Hvac. This project just received environmental clearance, so we will be moving forward with design. So the first step for us here is to get a proposal related to what that design cost would be, so we can get an understanding of what that's going to cost us and moving forward with design. Project number 8 on this slide is the South Tower Broadway and Elizabeth project. There are upcoming community meetings related to both Broadway and Elizabeth, and then San Pablo and Ted C. Wills. So we are currently in design, and something that is desired is community meetings. And so on February 8th, there will be a community meeting via Zoom on Broadway and Elizabeth. So the council district office, park staff, and the community and the design consultant will be on there. And then similarly on February 15th, there will be a design community meeting related to San Pablo and Ted C. Wills. Next stage of the process is pre-construction. So we have a couple projects that are in this phase, including the Logan Park shade structure. Right now, the shade sail is being fabricated. So once that is completed, then that will move forward into construction, and that construction will take about a month once that shade structure is delivered here to Fresno. Projects 2 and 3 on this slide were completed, so they've moved on to a different stage. And then Binland lighting is also on this slide because we are waiting for the lights to come in. So they've been ordered. We're just waiting for that lead time to run out. And then once the lights come in, we will install them. Moving on to construction in progress. So we have the Bulldog and 6th Community Center building, and this is specifically focusing on the north building. So we are officially in construction on this site, so that is very exciting, and working through that. And then we will also continue our efforts on the south building and getting a cost together for what the construction on that building would cost. The second project on here is the Maxi Parks contamination project, and essentially the testing that goes along with that. So right now the consultant is working through that additional testing and putting together some reports that will then need to go back up to the state for review, and then that will allow us to understand the next steps from there. The last project on this one is the Lingo, which is also known as the Link Center, and the project specifically for Measure P was procuring items for that center. So we have officially completed our ordering, and we have received the furnishing items, and we've begun an inventory to ensure that everything we ordered is what we received. And then we are also working through the procurement of the technology. So we put those orders in, but as you all know, with COVID and the pandemic, things are taking a little bit longer. So we're just tracking those technology items and making sure that they're still coming in. The last project on this slide has been crossed out with the exception of Pillabos. All the restrooms have been painted, and Pillabos is on schedule for the last week in January. So that will be completed this month. And then we have completed projects on this slide. So we have 11 projects on this side that have been completed and then kind of transferred into our ongoing maintenance phase. Those are the JSK Turf Rehabilitation Project, the Rotary East Pickleball Court Resurfacing and Lighting Project, Frank H. Ball, the ADA Compliance Feasibility Study was completed, the Pinedale Parking Lot, Cary Park Hockey Resurfacing, as well as Cary Park Irrigation Improvements, the Granny's Modular Removal, some fence, benches, and tot lot out at Toll House, Einstein Center painting, and then the painting of restrooms at multiple locations that are listed here in front of you, including Logan, Einstein, Orchid, Manchester, and Rotary East, as well as replacing the restroom roofs both at Orchid and Pillows Park. Those have been completed. And then the last slide in this presentation was projects that were in waiting due to some other extenuating circumstances, and those have all moved on, so that is great news. The Milburn and Dakota project, that was awarded Prop 68 money, so that project, as you saw, moved. Maxi Hvac was on hold until it was cleared for that environmental assessment that was related to the HVAC, so we got the clearance on that. And then Prop 68, as you know, they awarded, and then the regional park tree trimming contract just went to council this last meeting in January. So once we have gotten confirmation from Public Works that that's a go, we will move this back up into more than likely the construction phase to show where we are hitting tree trimming within our parks. And that sums up my presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Aldi, for the presentation. Does any of the commissioners have any questions regarding this presentation?
I do, Madam Chair.
Proceed, Commissioner Barraza.
Thank you. There was one project and they had a number 3, and I'm talking about Phillips Park. I heard that there was a community building also included in that project, and I'm assuming that maybe those components are separated. But could you tell me where the community building that's being proposed for the site, where is that budgeted? Is that not part of Measure B?
I'm not sure 100% what you're talking about, Commissioner Barraza, but this project specifically on, you're talking about the design phase, Pillows, turf, and irrigation improvements. That's in design, that's specifically just related to the grass out at Pillows, nothing related to the community center.
So the community center, is that funded, or is it just being discussed as a possibility for funding?
I'm not sure. Aaron, do you know more about the Pillows Community Center?
Commissioner Barraza, I believe that's just being discussed. That wasn't funded part of the Measure P dollars that Aldi was going through at this point in time.
Thank you.
Do we have any other questions? Dr. Apuda, I see your hand up.
I had 2 questions. Aldi, I think you answered one. On slide 5, you had the Milburn and Dakota and awarded. Was that indicating that it was awarded the Prop 68 funds? Is that
Correct.
what awarded meant? Okay. And then the other question I had, I think it was slide 8, under Toll House, you had some items there, but I wasn't clear what was done. I think it was.
Yeah, great question. So under Toll House, we had a tot lot, fence, and benches.
And what does that mean? I don't know what that means.
Yeah, so no problem. So specifically related, we have tot lot, which is playground equipment. We have fence, so more than likely, either damages to the fence out there or any existing new fence that needed to be put in, and then benches, same thing. So any either new benches or replacement of benches, because they've been outdated or ended their life.
Okay, great, thank you.
Dr. Puda, those were new benches, and that was new fencing. That was a completely new facility that was installed at Toll House.
Okay, thank you, I appreciate it.
Thank you. Commissioner Parks, Commissioner Singh, do you guys have any questions?
Just a quick question. I imagine that the timeline for some of these projects will carry into the next budget year, the next fiscal year. I'm wondering if someone from the Parks Department or administration could give just a very brief description of, as we're looking at the budget and going through that process, how will we see those funds kind of carry across from fiscal year to fiscal year?
Yeah, Commissioner Parks, great question. And Christy and Aaron, feel free to chime in here as well. But essentially, you are correct. Not all of these projects will be completed in fiscal year 22. So we will keep the funding that was identified for them, which is essentially fiscal year 22 funding, that will follow that project. So even if we're going into the next calendar year for the purposes of the city, That money will stay with it. It will use fiscal year 22 money, and then the fiscal year 23 money will be a new pot of money that we can put towards, you know, projects. If we need to additionally fund a project that's on here, maybe because we didn't fully fund it this year, we can add funding, but essentially they are two separate pots.
Thank you. Commissioner Singh, do you have any questions in regards to this presentation?
No questions, thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Cummings, do you have any questions?
No, thank you. I do not.
Thank you. All right, we will now move on to hearings. ID number 22-177, hearing to receive public input allocations related to Measure P and the annual Parks Department budget and capital improvement plans. Would any member of the public like to make a comment regarding this item? You will have up to 5 minutes for this comment.
Yes, we have Tyler. Tyler, you are unmute. Tyler, unmute yourself. There you go.
There we go. I was saying that I received an email that the webinar this evening was canceled. Was that an error?
Yes, this meeting was
Okay.
not canceled.
Okay, excellent. Well, I'll begin. Good evening, committee members. My name is Tyler Semrick, and it's a pleasure to be here on behalf of the Fresno County Historical Museum. I'm the lead curator and manager for our museums here at the Fresno Fairgrounds. In my time working for the museums, it has been a pleasure to see the addition of new exhibits and features which engage the public and give access to historical and cultural material, which might otherwise never be seen. The purpose of the Fresno County Historical Museum is to educate the public, as well as to preserve and document the past for future generations to enjoy. Our objective is to tell the many stories of diverse cultural, industrial, and agricultural heritage of Fresno County, and that is the basis for our funding request today. The exhibit we want to construct will serve to tell the history of agriculture in Fresno and how we became the #1 provider of agricultural goods in the world. The exhibit will showcase stories including, but not limited to, the history of labor, water shortages, water storage, and irrigation projects, the changing and dynamic quality of our soil in relation to air quality and climate change, and the proximity to relevant markets that made our county's agriculture a cultural cornerstone for many communities. The proposed exhibit will be displayed using projection mapping, which is a unique technique in which three-dimensional spaces are turned into a display surface and synchronized with audio to enhance the educational experience, allowing the exhibit to come to life, as you can see from behind me. We have past experience with projection mapping in our museum, and it has been demonstrated to result in high levels of educational value and community engagement. This exhibit is our first projection map display here at the museum, and in 17.5 minutes covers the history of Fresno County from saber-toothed tigers to the construction of the high-speed rail, featuring a changing map projected on a topographic relief of the terrain of Fresno County, as well as photographs of the relevant periods on the bottom right. The amount of funding that we are requesting for consideration for today is $243,050. Thank you for your time, and I'll be happy to take any questions you may have. In closing, I encourage you all to book a tour and come to the Fresno County Historical Museum to see our exhibits and what we have to offer the community.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Justin Wagner.
All right. Are you able to hear me?
Yes.
All right, so my name is Justin. I'm here today to discuss possible park improvements I think would really help out our city of Fresno. Just a quick introduction about myself. I'm 30. I was raised here in Fresno. I lived here for most of my life. I joined the military for a little bit and got my degree, which I'm pursuing landscape architecture. And I am a huge part of the skateboarding community, and I've been skateboarding for about 20 years. And my proposal is to create a action sports park located on the corner of San Pablo and Belmont. The specific address, I believe, is 532 North San Pablo. The site specifically is currently a park and is located under the Freeway 180. There's currently just a foundation of a park, and there's a lot of what I consider dead space there. And the existing features that are there are a play jungle gym and a swing set. Currently, the swing sets are pretty destroyed and not usable by anyone that goes to the park, and the play structure has graffiti on it, and it's just, I think, in need of a redesign, honestly, because of how much empty space there is. This opportunity of the freeway being over this park is a great opportunity. I think we should take a chance on and create a action sports park that would provide shade and covering for the participants here in Fresno. As we all know, the summers get really hot here, and a lot of us action sports people have to travel as far as Bakersfield or to San Francisco in order to enjoy some type of facility that provides cover from the heat. The site is very accessible, so it would be a great opportunity for a lot of people to come visit it. And another great benefit is that across the street is a community garden that I think that if we created an action sports park, that would draw many participants from across the city, not necessarily that specific neighborhood. It could also help create programs that would connect more youth to that community garden. Within a half-mile distance from the site, there is a skate shop that is really connected to the community, and they've actually gone out of their way and built some sort of do-it-yourself kind of skate park at their own shop that a lot of people like to use. This site would serve the Tower District and the downtown community that is really lacking any sort of action sports park. The Tower District even has a skateboarding bar called Fresbrew that kind of tells you like how big of a community this kind of specific spot is. And sorry, I'm reading my notes.
And you have 1 minute left, Justin.
Okay. Like I mentioned, I've been skateboarding for 20 years, and over those 20 years, I've traveled all across Fresno looking for different places that I can express my sport. Downtown in Fresno, Tower District, Fresno High area is a very big spot for skateboarders, rollerbladers, and all the same to go kind of and express that that sport. So I really think that this would be a good opportunity. If you even just go on a Google Street Walk around this site, you can see like how great of a spot this could be. Thank you.
Thank you. City Clerk, is there any other members in the public wanting to make a public comment?
Chair McCoy, we do not have any members of the public in the chambers or online that are requesting to speak.
Thank you. Does any member of the commission have any questions or comments regarding this item? No? Commissioner Parks or Commissioner Singh, I can't see you guys, so do you guys have any questions?
No questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
No
We
que-
will now move on to the next item, ID number 22-178, hearing to review the Parks, Recreation, and Arts Commission Parks Prioritization Strategy that will inform the FY23 budget recommendations to City Council. Would WRT and Parks please begin the presentation?
Alrighty.
ठीक है
Aldi, should I jump in?
मैं ਹੁਣ शुरू करांगा
Pause so we can fix that technical issue real quick.
Let me just
ठीक है
check who's
ਅਸੀਂ ਉਹ
that.
ਜਲਦੀ ਨਾਲ ਟੈਕਨੀਕਲ ਪ੍ਰੋਬਲਮ ਠੀਕ ਕਰ ਲੈਨੇ ਆ
Hold on. John, do you mind exiting out of your shared so I can see what's going on?
Yeah, sure. Peter Winch will do that.
Thank you. Aram, we can hear you. Give us 1 second. You look like you logged off really quick. Okay, John, you should be good to go.
All righty. We will start sharing screen again, and then Aldi, if it's okay with you, I'll kick this off.
Yeah, John, just one word. So commission members and public, just to reframe your minds, at the last PrAC commission meeting, WRT came before you and you all voted on weighting criteria related to existing park prioritization, new park prioritization, and then had a discussion about park amenities. So this is an extension of that conversation, and really to inform you of kind of like where things shook out in terms of that weighting criteria, and really to lay the foundation for you all to be prepared to make recommendations to City Council on the February 7th meeting. So with that, go ahead, John.
Great. Yeah. So this is just a discussion item tonight, and yeah, continuation of our last presentation to you just 2 weeks ago. We're going to first of all, I can just introduce myself, John Gibbs, WRT, and principal here at the firm, and been assisting this commission and staff on developing a lot of prioritization and assisting with the highest need recommendations. We're first in our agenda here just going to reconfirm the Measure P and the commission's role. We're just going to do that very briefly with a couple of slides, and then we're going to get right back to some really cool work and some really interesting results from the input that you guys gave us at our last meeting, as well as the community survey results, and some really fantastic work that was done by a lot of folks to get the word out. And so we have just a tremendous amount of input that we've received for existing parks, for new parks, and then also related to some park amenities, and I'll be coming back to y'all to lead that discussion. So jumping right into it, just always like to make sure that we've recapped and are clear about what Measure P is, because we have new members of the public joining these calls, and also these PowerPoints are posted. So we just want to make sure everybody's working from the same information. The important monies that are generated by Measure P through a 3/8 cent sales tax, and those funds are going into 5 different buckets that are listed here on the screen, 2 of which we've been spending quite a bit of time talking about, and that is existing parks, so funding for existing parks, and funding for new parks. We've created some graphics that describe those same 5 buckets, but in the form of a pie chart, and being a little bit more clear about some of the percentages associated with them. And I won't describe it in any more detail, but this graphic is here and available. So Aldi's going to step in and just, reconfirm and talk about the important role that this commission takes.
Thanks, John. So we just wanted to bring back this slide. You have seen this exact slide and the slide after this in previous presentations, but I think it's important because you all are serving a very important role for the city. And so just calling back attention to the ordinance, where it essentially explains that you all have the authority to conduct hearings and receive public input on allocations related to this ordinance, updates to the Parks Master Plan and Cultural Arts Plan, and annual Parks Department budget and capital improvements plans, and then make recommendations to City Council. So that last component there, the annual Parks Department budget, and then making the recommendations to City Council, is what we are doing right now. So just to recap on the time frame, we're in the midst of conducting community hearings, outreach, and engagement. We have all been doing this as a team, and are going to continue to do it. And then February 7th, which is the meeting that I mentioned earlier, that will be when you all make your first set of recommendations to City Council related to both general fund and Measure P money for the fiscal year 23 budget. And then moving on to the next slide, this just calls attention to kind of where we're headed. So, through March and May, we will continue community hearings, outreach, and engagement. And then your second set of recommendations to City Council will be right around that May, June, after the mayor's budget comes out. And you all will have an opportunity to review that and then make recommendations related specifically to the Measure P component of that budget.
Thanks.
My colleague Peter Winch is going to be walking us through existing parks and new parks, and all this good work was also supported by Hannah Galdov from WRT, also part of our team. Take it away, Peter.
Great, thanks, John and Aldi, and good to be back. Peter Winch with WRT. Going to walk first through the existing park prioritization work that we did with you, and then we'll get into the new parks. What we did at our last meeting 2 weeks ago was walk through this framework, which is symbolized by the graphic on the left, of how to set priorities for using Measure P funds on existing parks. So that's this first bucket of Measure P funding. And the commission moved recommended to approve the park prioritization framework as presented to the commission, and that's shown at left, the framework diagram, and to weight the factors, each of these factors that is represented by a small circle here, to weight the factors according to the responses of all commissioners that were in attendance. And that included both commissioners who voted electronically using the voting that we used in the Zoom meeting, and also commissioners who were present in person and submitted their votes on paper. We asked the commission at the last meeting 2 weeks ago to look at all of those conditions that we described, the 7 on the right, and after reviewing each one, think about and then let us know how they felt each one should be weighted, whether they should be higher than, equal to, or less than average in importance. And the results of that voting were that park condition, parks without a neighborhood amenity, parks with a pipeline project, and emerging priority parks should all be weighted higher than average. And that community priority parks that were identified through input and engagement done during the PMP, which is the Parks Master Plan process, and flagship parks and parks adjacent to access gaps, those were all maps that came out of the Parks Master Plan, those should be considered of equal importance, but not greater importance. So that's that result column here that is highlighted. We took all your votes, which are represented right here, and we translated that to a result of higher or equal. There were actually no categories that ended up being thought of as less than equal in importance. So then we assigned a weighting. This is this last category on the right to help us put into action that result, that higher or equal determination that the commission made at the last meeting. So what we've done is we've added a weighting of 3 to factors that were considered of higher than average importance, and a weighting of 2 to factors that were considered of equal importance. Other factors would be considered a 1, although there weren't any 1s in that sense. But there's one caveat here, which is that the emerging priority parks, which are the ones parks that are identified in the community survey, we've now gotten, like, as of January 20th, we received approximately 900 responses, which is awesome. So much engagement. But what that means is that there are some parks that may have gotten noted by 1 survey respondent, and there are other parks that might have gotten noted that received lots and lots and lots of support from community members. We felt it was important actually to incorporate that range into the weighting. So we've given a weighting of 1 for parks that got a little bit of attention from people who responded to the survey, 2 for parks that got a fair amount of attention, and 3 for the very top parks that were overwhelmingly favorites in that community survey. And I'm going to show you the results now. So that community survey, of the 898 responses that were received by January 20th at 5 p.m., this question name 3 parks that you feel are most in need of upgrades, got 540 responses. So not everyone who took the survey responded to this question, but most did. And you can see that most of our responses were in English, but we also got a fair sizable number in Punjabi and Spanish and 1 response in Hmong. And of the, I think, 85 parks in Fresno, 62 of them got at least 1 vote. So that's a pretty broad spectrum. A lot of parks were recognized as in need of support by at least 1 community member. But at the very top of the list, we see Woodward and Roding, the 2 big regional parks in Fresno, getting the greatest number of votes. Those were the parks that people felt were should be the highest priority, definitely in need of upgrades. Also up there on that list, you see Inspiration Park, Oso de Oro Park, JSK Park, as I think it may be called by some, Orchid, Vinland, Holmes, and Sunnyside.
Before you get in the shower.
I think someone's unmuted and maybe can mute. Okay, there we go. And so anyway, several other parks rising to the top of the list. Jaswant Singh Kalra, Orchid, Vinland, Holmes, and Sunnyside all receiving over 50 votes and receiving 2 points from us on our weighting. So the result of this exercise is that you're seeing the 4 pages of a park prioritization table. This is the result of the factors that we've identified combined with the weighting that the commission recommended to us. And so you see this list is sorted from by overall score, which is using those weighting factors to convert these factors into an overall score. The parks in order from the top, I'm not going to name all 85, but just starting at the top, we've got Vinland, Einstein, Quigley, Logan, El Dorado, River Bottom, Roding, and 9th and Tulare. Those, I think, are the ones that get an overall score of 10 or more, and then the list goes on. Oop, I skipped a page. And we can go through that in more detail during the discussion. I imagine people are going to want to reflect on that a little bit more. We are going to be looking for you to, I think, confirm and make a recommendation on park prioritization at your next meeting. And that might be as simple as acknowledging this list and recognizing that the parks, as they sort out in this list, should be the city's park priorities. But we're going to open that for discussion at this meeting. Then we're going to be able to dive deeper. We're going to, with staff, determine maybe a few sites where we can focus on learning more about the condition of those sites, what the needs might be, and engaging with community members and getting a better definition of park priority projects. In other cases, the projects that will be going into the CIP for those priority parks may be based on what we know, based on the parks master plan process, which did take a look at every park in Fresno and come to at least a high level understanding of what the needs of those sites were. Shall we go directly? I think this is a question maybe for staff or maybe no for the chair. Shall we go directly into new parks, keep going for discussion, or would folks like to stop now?
I think we should keep rolling.
Okay. I'll keep rolling. Yeah. All right. So with new park prioritization, similarly, the commission moved to approve the prioritization framework for new parks. And again, that's represented by the diagram here at the left. That includes these 5 factors: the needs gradient of the park's master plan, community priorities of the park's master plan, pipeline park projects, other plans, and emerging community priorities. To use those factors as the basis for a map that's going to identify new park priority locations. And to update us on what's new, I'm not going to go over all the factors again, just what we just introduced a couple of new things. First, we've been able to map all of the potential park sites that are identified in the Fresno General Plan. These sites are coming from the specific plans and from the general plan process, and maybe in some cases from other community initiatives. And they've been identified as potential sites for new parks. And those are shown here on this map in that dark red color. And the second thing that we've done since we last met with you is that we've been able to analyze not all, but a good chunk of the survey responses that we got on the question, are there any specific areas in town that you feel are not well served by parks? Name the nearest major cross streets. And you can see in this map, and this is not a complete map yet, but on February 7th, we will be showing you a complete map of those survey responses. You can see, this is called well, I don't want to get into the details of the GIS, but this is an analysis of, the dots represent actual intersections that people named. The heat map is indicating areas of greater density of responses. So you can see really some clear patterns here about what areas of the city members of the community felt were in need of new parks. Again, this is not done. We're not finished doing this analysis. It was a little bit of a heavy lift. There's a lot of responses. We didn't anticipate getting 900 responses, which is great. But we will be bringing back a complete map analyzing the results at the next meeting. So also at the next meeting, we will be updating the map shown on this diagram, which is going to bring together the 5 factors that are shown on the left and try to represent them. I think we're going to achieve better clarity than this map has. And we're going to be able to show, I think, something more along the lines of this map, but taking into account all 5 of these factors that should go into the decision making around new park priorities. So again, nothing is expected today in terms of decision making, but just looking forward to next session that we will be looking for a recommendation from the commission on how to prioritize areas and sites for new parks. And we'll have a map that we hope will be the right guide for your recommendation. And then we'll go into a process during the spring and beyond, because this is a 5-year CIP really that we're building, identifying specific sites and what recreation elements and what sort of thematic priorities might inform the design of those sites. With that, I'm going to hand it off to John to dive a little deeper into a subject that we introduced at the last meeting. John, take it away.
Great, and I see a couple of hands that are raised by commission members, and we'll let Kimberly kind of go through all those questions, and we'll be able to take the slides back to wherever there's a question. I know we're moving through a lot of material here, and we're happy to reshare some of these slides. So I'm going to close out the third area of work here, and this one's a little different. So previously we've been looking specifically at park sites, whether existing parks primarily or new parks, based on a particular location. And the approach that I'm going to be talking about, and we introduced this last time, but it was more of a high-level conversation. We're going to take it a little further tonight. This looks at more as an amenity, and it looks at what kinds of needs do amenities serve? Who do these amenities serve? And thinking about it in a little different way. And so we put a slide here that really just tries to summarize this with some clarity. So we're calling this a recreation, excuse me, if you could just go back, a recreation-based strategy. It's considered in addition to the park prioritization, the more geographic-based approach that we just covered in the previous sections of this presentation. And where prioritization focused on specific parks, here we're focusing on amenity improvements that can be made in many parks across the systems. We've organized these the idea of these improvements around themes a little higher level, and those are generated by you all last week at our discussion, and also through the community survey. And what do we do with these? Well, these themes will inform city staff as they develop amenity improvement projects moving forward. And these may apply to the CIP over the next 5 years and likely would be revisited annually. So let me go in and explain a little bit more about what this is. So at our last week, we talked, we just had a discussion. It's a little loose and high level, but you all started jumping in as you begin to think about what kinds of improvement programs would start to make sense across the park system. We talked about climate change, issues of shade and cooling. We talked about trees, got down to the specifics of drinking fountains and making water available to folks. We talked about family gathering spaces, social spaces in parks. We talked about the character of parks, just straight beautification. We talked about our unhoused population and some of their needs in parks, safety, security, active transportation. These were some of the themes that the PRAC talked about last time. And then in our community survey, we asked a question: what recreation facilities, amenities are most needed in our parks? And here we got some really interesting feedback. Natural areas and paths, multi-use trails, those kind of go together. And one of the things that's very interesting about this is that this represents a trend across the country. Lots of interest nationally for natural areas, trails, multi-use paths as part of that package. We also heard about pickleball courts and dog parks and playgrounds, community centers, soccer fields, picnic areas, and kind of the list went on. We just kind of pulled as a sample here just some of the highest rated ones. All this information we think is going to be fantastic for staff, for city council moving forward, and certainly would want to make it available to the commission as well as we finish compiling all these survey results. So a lot of really good data. And we took this and turned it into a series of themes that we think capture a lot of these more specific amenity ideas, but turns it into a theme that perhaps gives a little bit more purpose for staff and gives staff a chance to be creative about what makes an interesting improvement program that they may be able to advance over the next couple of years in our parks. And so these slides just simply summarize that. So the first slide talks about the theme of climate resilience related to heat. And we recognize that climate change is going to create hotter conditions. Parks, pools, and recreation centers can help protect our community by offering shade, services, and cooling close to home. So this is a bit of a values statement of a theme that the PRAC would in theory, hopefully endorse. And then examples of potential improvement projects that could come out of that could include tree planting for shade, other sorts of structures for shade, pool renovations and splash pads, specifically providing drinking fountains and bottle fillers in parks, and thinking about some of our existing facilities, recreation centers, et cetera, to be cooling centers, that they have functional air conditioning and residents can go to these places to cool down if we're having extreme heat events. So those might be some of the potential projects that could be an outgrowth of a theme like this. The next one is similarly climate resilience, and this one's about drought. And so we'd say climate change will increase drought conditions, and park planting should become more water wise. Water delivery systems should be more efficient. So replanting, thinking about the health of our plants and our trees, reducing the amount of lawn where it's not needed for athletic facilities. We convert that to mulch and to climate appropriate shrub and ground cover planting. Irrigation system renovations and modernization, water-wise fixture replacements, et cetera. So all of these things are potential projects that could fit under this theme of climate resilience and drought. Next one is a theme of welcoming and safe parks. And the statement is that parks should appear welcoming to all at the entry and the perimeter and contribute positively to the surrounding neighborhood. So potential improvement projects can include just specific entry beautification, park signage, branding, exercises, and rules in parks, beautification around the perimeter with fencing and tree planting, etc., repainting buildings and adding murals, adding safety lighting. These could be some of the potential projects that specifically support this theme. Next one, and I'll move a little bit more quickly because you're getting the hang of it, I'm sure. This is about basic comfort and the usability of parks, kind of getting back to just making sure parks are kind of brought up to a similar level and are social spaces and places for families. Parks should be equipped with functional amenities that can be enjoyed by users. And as we visited parks, all the parks across Fresno a few years ago, we found a number of parks that didn't have functional amenities. So there's opportunities to make some of these upgrades. So in this category, improvement projects could be restroom upgrades, ongoing maintenance, different upgrades to furnishings along the lines of what Aldi already mentioned, of thinking about trash cans and trash removal and standardization across the system. That would fit very well into basic comfort and usability in parks. Field renovations, just making sure we had fields that were playable, that had irrigation systems that operated, and that those fields were serviceable for all the athletic activities that happen. Playground renovations, and there's certainly other amenities and repairs that would fall under this theme. Inclusion and accessibility. Parks are inclusive to all users, and improvements are coordinated with the city's ADA transition plan, meaning that the city needs to provide universal access and has a plan in place to do so, and that these park improvements should work in parallel with that. So thinking about accessible routes, building upgrades to improve accessibility, creating all abilities, play features in playgrounds, supporting health and wellness, and really thinking about multi-generational park amenities like pickleball within our park system. And lastly is a theme of trails and safe access to parks, something that the Commission talked at length about last time. Parks should be safely accessed from surrounding neighborhoods by all ages. Trails are integral to a park system and can provide access to both urban parks and natural areas. We think that's a good value statement. And examples of potential improvement projects could include the things that are listed here, including specific access within parks. Something happened here on this one. And unfortunately, something got messed up, and this is a repeat of the previous slide, so I'm not sure what happened there. None of us caught this, but ostensibly it would include describing crossings at surrounding parks as well as trail improvements. So what you might look at something next week might be something as simple as these themes will inform city staff as they develop amenity improvement projects. These may apply to the CIP, the Capital Improvement Program, over the next 5 years and be revisited annually. This applies to and that's a repeated statement there too. So you get the idea. And that's where we would revisit that next week, and probably with a couple of edits there because it looks like we missed something. And then any discussion tonight, we would just incorporate that into any finalizations here. These are pretty high level, meaning to guide broader improvement strategies across the park system. We're going to be back with you on February 7th. And as Peter and Aldi had described earlier, so it's there highlighted on the screen. And that'll be an important step to give city staff guidance as they move into the CIP process. Thank you. That wraps up our presentation, and we'll hand it back over to Chairwoman McCoy.
Thank you, John. Thank you for that presentation. I know that our commissioners may have questions, so I do see that Commissioner Barraza has his hand up. So Commissioner Barraza, you can go ahead and proceed with your questions.
Thank you, Madam Chair. There is there are two sections under the expenditure plan, the Measure P ordinance, that points out projects that leverage state, federal, or philanthropic funding shall receive funding priority. And that's section 7-1506, subsections D for existing parks and subsection D for new parks. And this question is for John. How are we going to comply with that requirement? Are we going to evaluate or measure what investments have been made in some facilities? The city of Fresno owns a lot of vacant land that was designated for parks, and some of those have had a lot of investments by the community, and many of those are worth a lot of money. I would say in the millions. So my question is, the criteria that's being set up to set the priorities, how do we comply with the requirement that says that those projects that have already funding commitments, that they get a high priority?
Commissioner Barraza, thank you for your question. I'll help tackle this, and then WRT can chime in as well. So I think two parts here are important to call attention to. One of those being that, and I don't know if you want to pull up the slides that go along with this, John or Peter, but essentially in terms of the new park prioritization, there's an area where, and it will also apply to bucket one existing parks, but there's an area where we've partnered with the planning department, and they have really done some analysis in relation to the general plan and then the other specific neighborhood plans that are out there. And the reason for this is, like you said, right, there's been community input that's already been, tackled, and there's been investment in the community that's already been acknowledged in a lot of those plans. And so essentially planning went through that and did an analysis and then provided that to staff to show, hey, here are some parks that we draw out from that analysis, right? So that's one way that we're reflecting back on planning documents that the city's doing, so that we're making sure not to work in silos. And then the second component of what you're saying really falls on staff. So each bucket has specific, we'll call them sub-requirements that are required. So for example, you mentioned one. Another sub-requirement would be out of bucket one, at least 5 million needs to go to maintenance. So there are multiple sub-requirements within each bucket. So it will really be on staff to make sure that those sub-requirements are met. Of course, you all can keep that in mind as you're making recommendations to City Council here on February 7th. But to go through each sub-requirement would be pretty cumbersome for you all in terms of waiting, but it's definitely something we want you to keep in mind, and then something that staff will make sure is executed on the back end before our proposed budget is submitted to the city.
I think that you have an item that you called Park with Pipeline Project. The question that I asked before, I know that typically that would entail projects where maybe some funding allocation has been made by the council, where there's money already being allocated. But the question is, how do you handle those projects that applied for Measure P, where a lot of community input went into the development of those projects? Those projects have master plans where they defined the scope of the project, so there's been and the land is in most cases it's owned by the city. So where's that group of projects that have a lot of community engagement? Where do those fit? Are they part of the pipeline project?
Great question, Commissioner Braza. So John here and Peter are navigating to a slide, I think with the circles, that calls attention to the different areas.
Slide 24, Peter? Just that all the criteria for new parks.
Yep, so, and John and Peter chime in here as well if you have additional input, but Commissioner Braga, to your point, staff also asked ourselves that same question when we were working with WRT. How do we acknowledge, parks or areas that have received, community input or investment? So you'll see here, right, the top two circles that are in blue, Fresno Parks Master Plan. Those two we already know. The third one down is Pipeline Park. So as you alluded to, this really calls out parks that received funding in the fiscal year 22 budget. So there's a specific definition for what that means and the intent of how we used that bubble or that criteria. And then you have other plans, and that is what I was mentioning about, is it in the Parks Master, or not Parks Master, the general plan or a Southwest specific plan? Or, and is it demonstrated in there, that community investment or input? And then you have emerging community priorities. So John and Peter, if you want to add a layer to that, but I think that's really what we wanted to show.
Yeah, I think we captured it there in the other plans. So just that there's been a lot of recognition by the city and by community members to support a particular project, and so we've really captured it there. And I think this was a really interesting map because from in some really intense work with planning staff, able to pull together a series of locations for parks that are described currently in the general plan, and just making sure that that those are captured and continued as part of this process, so that they're all able to be fully considered moving forward. And again, we're not prioritizing these sites as tonight or as part of this process, just making sure that all of those potential new park sites that have been talked about and have some momentum, and according to those various circles that all be described, or making sure that those are all captured here in this process moving forward.
Also, something that I noticed on the park prioritization weighting, you had 7 items, and item number 5 says park adjacent to access gap, which I really, I'm happy that you did that, because that's a very good approach to capture the needs of the community and places where we have access gaps. But I noticed you used that for the existing parks, but it sounds, I may be wrong, but it looks like you didn't include that for the new parks in those factors that you take into account. Is there a reason why you didn't do that?
Yeah, great question. We did it for the existing parks because we recognize that investing in an existing park could help to provide better amenities to those areas that aren't currently served. Separate from that, when we look at new parks, we're only interested in gap areas as the priority. And so it's not going to be adjacent to a gap, it is a gap. So any of those new parks are where there's presently a gap. And our map is starting to really capture that. You can see it in slide 23, where this is the areas, and we've faded it back. It's not entirely clear yet because it's not done, and we're still compiling so many of the community responses. But the map is going to, the map that we're now still working on is going to take those gap areas of the city and overlay that with the the outcome of all these circles, community priorities and other plans, things in the general plan, pipeline projects, et cetera, in order to really target, create a new map that says these are the priority areas for new parks, and it'll capture everywhere that doesn't have a park, and then it'll add more emphasis for where there's been a lot of additional support for a park, based on combining all these factors.
I feel you guys did an excellent job in capturing exactly what's happening there, and I really, really appreciate it. One last thing is, I'm assuming that you have a section somewhere where you have a definition of like the pipeline project. What does that mean? I mean, just for the benefit of residents that want to know, I mean, what are they talking about? You know, and we take
Yeah.
it for granted that the public understands everything, but it would be very helpful to have a definition of terms someplace at the end of this document. And
think
thank
it's
you, John, for a very good job you're doing on this.
I think that's a great suggestion for us as we put these together in a final state. I think a definitions page would be helpful. So we've had to make up some important terms in order to keep us all on the same page. But you know, what is a pipeline project? Is it one of those key definitions? Thanks.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner Barraza. Does any other of our commissioners have any questions pertaining to this presentation?
I see Dr. Puta's hand up. That helps.
Thank you so much, John. Dr. Puta, you may proceed.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I want to echo Commissioner Barraza's compliment to WRT. I actually was supposed to say this at the beginning of the meeting, but I didn't look at my notes from last time. The way you all have taken some very complex concepts and information and made it not always easy, but accessible to us as commissioners to make some decisions. I'm kind of floored thinking about what we would have had to been trying to do as individuals who these are not our areas of expertise to make the decisions that we have to make. And I'm particularly impressed with the themes that you came up with and presented today. I know I personally felt heard, and I felt like our community was heard. And I think you affirmed, I remember when you all first being presented as the consultant, Commissioner Barraza and Commissioner McCoy speaking very highly of you, and you've affirmed their trust in you. So I just wanted to say that to you all. The question I have is related to the community's input. Based on other times we've had community input, I'm curious, were you able to disaggregate the data by zip code or by area to see who was it that recommended Boating Park or Woodward Park or this park? Does it all come from one area, or is it kind of generalized through the Fresno community?
I can try to take that, Dr. Oputa. We haven't yet been able to dig into those questions, the demographic questions on the survey. I don't remember now whether we asked for address and whether we're or zip code and whether we're going to get that information. I see Aldi nodding her head, so I think that's a yes.
Yeah, because I tried to fill it out, and I don't live in Fresno, so I couldn't.
Oh,
That's
okay.
why I asked for your address. Yeah.
Okay, so we will do that. That's a good reminder.
And it's a great question because that helps you all interpret the data. The data is the data, but for example, did a majority put Woodward Park? Because when you ask somebody, like, what's your favorite park? Like, it's Woodward Park. I love that park. Osa de Oro. It's like, it's a fantastic park. I love that park. You know, or is it because that they live next to a particular park? And that helps you all. It helps everyone understand that. So I think we get that. Your question is prompting us to make sure we're able to offer some additional facts back to you all so that you can do your job and understand data accordingly.
Excellent, thank you.
Thank you. Do any of our other commissioners have any questions in regards to this presentation?
This is Commissioner Singh here. Just want to thank Dr. Puta for bringing that very good point that was sitting in the back of my mind during this entire presentation. Really, also just taking into consideration who has access to the survey, who knows about the survey. Most of the folks, when we went walking door to door, did not know the survey was even out. So, you know, whichever groups have had access to the survey have been very much able to and that's not a bad thing. It's a very good thing, you know, to let their community know, hey, this survey is here, you know, complete it. But we also have to, you know, acknowledge that, you know, not the entire community or the entire community of Fresno has not had the same opportunity to give their input on the survey. And one more thing, I just kind of want to know, in terms of where to go. Oh yeah, in terms of this survey, actually, how will it be utilized once this, you know, once the 2023 budget has been decided? Is it also going to be like on a you know, continuous basis where folks can give input and, you know, it will, you know, be added in, or like, of course not for the 2023 budget entirely, but like in terms of, you know, any input that's given by the community, is that the survey that's going to be used from now on, or is there going to be something else to accommodate that? Some input on that would be nice.
Great question, Commissioner Singh. Two things on there. One, I think, you know, WRT mentioned they'll come back on the 7th with additional information related to the survey. I think the diversity will be something to call attention to too. It's very interesting. I just got a preliminary glance at it, but in terms of responses, there were quite a few English, but the individuals marked Punjabi or Hmong as their native language that they speak at home. So found that very interesting, and I think those statistics will be helpful the next time we come back, just to give you guys another layer of information to review. Second question that you spoke about was related to, you know, the life of this survey. So we didn't want to close it on the 20th like hard and fast. I think it is very valuable, and I think it informs more than just 1 year's budget. I think we're going to utilize this survey as we move forward. As you've heard, the Parks Department is going to be putting together a capital improvement plan. And so that is something that we will utilize that information for going forward. And then it will morph, right? Our community outreach will likely change, and we'll have more boots on the ground community outreach. And at some point, you know, if that survey, we feel like it's had its life, then we will make sure to communicate that out and take down anything that has that QR code on there. If we decide to go with, you know, different forms of outreach, we'll make sure that we do, you know, if we do community meetings or, you know, different hearings, etc., we'll make sure that we'll take the same outreach steps we did with the survey for those community modalities as well.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Singh. Does any other commissioners, Commissioner Parks, I can't see you. Do you have any questions in regards to this presentation?
Thanks, Chair McCoy. Yes, I do have a question. I'm curious to know, and this may be for WRT, maybe for city staff, so I'll let you all decide. I'd like to know a little bit more about how this prioritization process, the survey, the community input is informing plans for bucket number 5. I feel like I have a somewhat good handle on the improving existing parks, new parks, recreation programs, all of that good stuff. How is this going to help City Council, our commission, prioritize bucket 5 for trails for the San Joaquin River Parkway and for street beautification?
Scott has his hand raised.
Good evening, Commissioner. Scott Mosier, Public Works. I know there is language in Measure P in the Section 5 dealing with trails that talks about the high priority network in the active transportation plan. So those are projects that have been implemented in more recent years. And I would think, given previous council adoption of that ATP and emphasis on the high priority network plus the Measure P language, I would think that would tend to inform those priorities.
I think I can add to that as well. Just coming back to the survey, there are questions that indeed we haven't analyzed the results from yet, but there are questions actually that deal with each of these buckets. So we are still in the process of gathering valuable community input on priorities in all the buckets, not just the two that we've reported on tonight. That's our focus.
And Commissioner Parks, to your point, your recommendations to City Council don't specifically have to be related to the buckets. They could be, they could include recommendations related to trails, if that makes sense, because that's not directly related to bucket one.
Thank you. Commissioner Cummings, do you have any questions in regards to this presentation?
No, thank you, I do not.
Thank you. I have one question. Peter, can you go back to, I think it's the scorecard that you were giving the parks?
Do you mean this is the scorecard essentially of your votes of which criteria should be weighted in which way? And then this slide is showing the total number of votes that were received in the survey by park. And then this slide is showing the prioritization list that comes out of all these factors. So I think this is what you're referring to.
Yes. It's kind of hard to see. I'm sorry. I'm looking for my my glasses. But oh, it went away.
There we go.
There
this
we
is
go.
A little better maybe?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
Okay, so like with the emergent priorities for 2022, I know that there's a parks need and then there's the weight score. I'm looking at some of them and I see that, so like with the higher weight score, it means that they are in the highest needs in that 33% that we're working off of, or that's just, I'm trying to understand.
Right. Okay. So this is a great question, and we're gonna travel underneath the hood. Where a park received, so each of these factors we assigned points to. If a park sort of shows up in any of the factors, it's getting points based on that factor. So we assigned a score of 3 to the parks that were in poor condition. We assigned a 2 because that was considered by the commission to be of higher importance. So when things were of higher importance, we assigned that 3 points. This category, for example, community priority in the existing parks master plan, the commission felt that was an average amount of, that should have an average amount of weight. So if a park showed up in this category as a yes, it got 2 points. So for example, Vinland Park here is getting 3 points for being in poor condition, 2 points for being identified during the park's master plan process as a priority, another 2 points for being identified in that plan as a flagship park, another 2 points as being adjacent to an access gap, 3 points for being a pipeline project, and then 3 points for being in our highest category of emerging priorities in the current survey. So the overall score is the addition of points that are given in all these categories. And the purpose is really to try to balance and get that weighted balance of all of the factors that are important as we consider this question.
And the last bit of information on the slide is on the far right side, indicating whether it's in a highest need neighborhood per our previous process. It has no bearing on the points. It's just here for information.
Okay, I guess my question and my concern is that when I look at this slide, I see a lot of our South Fresno parks at the bottom, and I see that the overall score is low. And yes, some of them may be in our highest needs neighborhood, but I'm just wondering how is that going to factor in? Because according to our park score, which we're horrible right now at, that a lot of our parks in South Fresno lack access to our residents, especially people of color. So I'm just wondering how is that overall score going to play?
Yeah, so it's a very fair point, and this is what Peter just walked through, and in this spreadsheet is the process that we've all laid out over the last couple of weeks with these criteria and this weighting, and this is what you get, when you push the button and get the results. And tonight we're looking at it and saying, how do we feel about this? And because these are the results that we're going to see next week. And it happens that whether it was the survey results and that actually didn't prioritize some of the parks in Southwest Fresno that you may be thinking of, whether it was that or whether it was there weren't pipeline projects there, we don't know. But potentially, because the park condition and a park without a neighborhood amenity, those two criterias would certainly apply to a lot of the parks that you may have in mind.
If I could add, it's sort of, we tried to keep the two exercises independent of each other. So we first went through all of the process of identifying and defining highest need neighborhoods. And then we went through a separate process here looking at parks and a separate set of criteria. So we try to keep the two ways of looking at the issue separate, but ultimately they have to be recombined and thought of together again. So the measure's language stands, and the commission and then ultimately council's recommendation that highest need neighborhoods be considered as we define them, and then the top 33%, it still stands that 50% of the Measure P funding needs to go to those parks. So right. that may mean that we're digging a little deeper in the list to identify the parks that get funded, because we need to make sure that the parks in the highest need neighborhoods get the funding that they need.
Right. There was some wisdom in how the ordinance was written.
Correct. I was just concerned because like again, at the beginning of the presentation, you see Woodward Park and you see Rhodium Park, and I guess those would be people's favorite parks because they could accommodate many different activities. However, I'm really concerned about the parks within the neighborhoods of the community, especially South Fresno. So that's why I asked that question. And it really would be helpful if we can get a breakdown of zip codes of who participated in the survey, and hopefully we can keep circulating the survey to get our residents, and especially in South Fresno, to participate to help guide us, if not for this allocation, for next year's allocation. So thank you both for answering my question. Do we have any other questions on this presentation? I see a hand up, but I can't see who it is.
It's Dr. Ofuta.
Okay, Dr. Ofuta, you can proceed.
Madam Chair, I really appreciate your point. And I just think, is there another page with the weighting factors? Or was this the only slide?
Yeah, that was one of four. Are you referring to the 4 slides that make up the table?
Yes.
So this is the first, this is one of 4. So this is some of the top scoring, and then it would go second page, third page, and fourth page.
Uh-huh. Thank you. That's what I wanted to say. Interesting. Okay, so to Chair McCoy's point, it is possible in our recommendation to have something related, it probably is a pretty mandatory based on the ordinance, related to, in addition to those overall scores, the highest need neighborhoods in a way that they rise up in a different way. It's like Peter said, they're separate now, but they have to come together in order to honor the ordinance and the percentage of funds that need to go to the highest needs area. Is that what I'm understanding that correctly, right?
That sounds right to me, yeah.
Yeah, and Commissioner Apuda and Chair McCoy, I think you bring up a really good point, and I think that's partially why 50% of, for example, bucket 1 has to go to highest need neighborhoods based on a definition that you all recommended, and then it went to council for vote. But that's like another catch, right? So that we make sure that the money is getting funneled to those highest needs areas, even if through exercises like this, maybe those parks don't come to the top, right? And then the second layer to that is that you all have a voice, right? You represent folks in your communities, and part of making recommendations on the 7th is voicing that. And maybe it's not 100% what this weighting criteria has, shaken out to be. Maybe it also includes narrative that you all bring to the table.
I'm wondering if it would make sense for the 7th for us to generate the list 3 different ways. First, overall, as we're seeing here, and then secondly, non-highest needs, and then all highest needs. And that way, the full spectrum, is available, and it's simply a matter of restructuring the spreadsheet a couple different ways.
Thank you for reading my mind.
This is Commissioner Parks. To that point, John, would it be possible to see these on a map as well? Or to see like the spreadsheet mapped and then
Sure,
colored in some
do
way?
anything.
Maybe I'm asking for too much, I'm sorry.
Magic. No, well, no, I think that's, we have that already done for the highest need neighborhood parks. And we would just have to do that then for the non-highest need neighborhood parks, which we also have all that information. So I think that's pretty reasonable.
Was there a map that was presented to the council when you presented the 33 percentile that showed, I remember because I listened to the council meeting, that there were projects that were left outside the highest need boundary, and you presented that to the council, but I don't recall having seen that before the commission. I mean, is there a map? Is there such a thing of that? I think you had what you call the pipeline projects, and the council was having a discussion about being able to incorporate those projects. But can I have a copy of that map that shows what's right outside the area that is not in the 33 percentile that was approved by the council?
Yeah, Commissioner Braza, that's public information. So we have that 33% map based on what the council voted, and that map has, the parks that fall within the 33% definition, and then the parks that fall without the 33% definition, and then what we're calling pipeline projects. So projects that are currently funded in the fiscal year 22, those will have a blue circle around them, and they also show whether they're in the 33% or outside the 33%. So we can definitely send that to the commission after tonight's meeting.
That'd be great. If you could provide all the commissioners, I know you will. Thank you very much.
No problem.
Thank you. Do we have any more questions in regards to this presentation?
Chair McCoy, Commissioner Parks again, one last question for me. I'm curious to know if there has been any work done or if any data exists yet on specific improvements at parks. I'm kind of, just for context, I've been trying to figure out how to ask this question. I'm kind of struggling with thinking through prioritizing the spending specific to parks without knowing what improvements need to be made. And as I look through the slides, I'm kind of wanting to switch the next steps with the commission making recommendations and then the city staff identifying projects. I guess I just wanted to throw that out there to get it on the record, that it's hard to consider prioritizing funding without knowing the specific improvements that might happen. And if, for example, we know we need to improve restrooms across all of the parks in the highest needs neighborhoods, perhaps we could do more work in parks rather than saying we're only prioritizing park A, B, C, D, and E, if that makes sense. So I guess it's not a question, just a comment, if we can think of it that way as we're preparing to make recommendations to the council.
Thank you, Commissioner Parks. Does any other commissioners have any questions before we move on to the next item?
Chair McCoy, you still need to take this out to the public.
Totally forgot. Thank you. We will now go out to the public for comments on this item. City Clerk, is there anyone in the public wanting to make a comment?
Chair McCoy, we do not have any public comment.
Thank you. We will now move on to the next item. ID number 22-179, hearing actions pertaining to proposed changes to the Parks Department master fee schedule. Will the Parks Department please begin the review of the recommended changes?
Good evening, Commissioners. Aaron and Gary, Parks Department. The presentation today.
Aaron, you have your notes on.
I'm sorry?
You have it, or Dari, you have it to our notes. Perfect, thank you.
Perfect, thank you. Commissioners, good evening. Aaron and Gary, Parks Department. The item before you today is a recap of the proposed master fee schedule changes that we brought to you last month. So really just want to go through those changes. I know there were some questions and clarifications. So just wanted to highlight what those proposed changes were and the reasoning behind those. If we can go to the next slide, please, Dari. So again, just the recommendation that before you guys today that you will be making is in reference to the Riverside Golf Course, general recreation fees, the neighborhood centers, parks and playground facilities, the rentals, and then our downtown mall vendor fees. So again, and before you, these are the proposed changes to the Riverside Golf Course. You can see the rates change for the weekdays after 2 o'clock, seniors, the tournament rates, and so forth. So these have been presented and just wanted to get them in front of you guys one more time for your review and recommendation. Next slide, please. This is regarding the swimming pools. We talked about the removal of these fees. We are collecting $7,800, but we're incurring about $22,000 worth of charges, personnel charges. So the recommendation would be to remove this and allow free entrance into our pools this summer for swimming. Next slide, please. Next items here, these are our rentals. These go into our gymnasiums, our community centers, and really what the change here is, just a recap, is to capture our hourly rates. These have been a few years, they're old, and just capturing what our current rate is just to recover our costs based on labor. Next one these are our downtown mall fees. We no longer provide this service. It's more of a cleanup and eliminating the costs that are currently shown in the master fee schedule. And then just going through the schedule, we brought this to you as a commission back in December. We're bringing it to you guys today for your final recommendation and ultimately taking it to council for their final approval mid-February. So just wanted to kind of open it up. Any questions you may have regarding any of the proposed changes? I'm here and available to answer any questions.
Do any of the commissioners have any questions for this in regards to this item? Okay, we'll go out to the public. Would any member of the public like to make a comment regarding this item? You may have up to 3 minutes.
Chair McCoy, we do not have any public comment.
Thank you. Do I have a motion to approve recommendations to City Council to approve the proposed changes to the Parks Department master fee schedule?
So moved, Commissioner Oputa.
Thank you, Dr. Apuda. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Commissioner Vang. City Clerk, please conduct a roll call vote.
Commissioner Parks?
Before we vote, it looked like Commissioner Cummings had her hand up. I just wanted to make sure we didn't miss if she had a question.
I did have a question.
Oh, sorry, Commissioner Cummings, I couldn't see your hand up.
That's okay. I figured that we had talked about this before, Director Aguirre, and I just wanted to make sure that we understood that the community groups renting the meeting rooms, that's the only one that kind of like pops out at me as I think it goes from like $20 to $45. It's just a concern for that particular category because, you know, very, very small community groups and encouraging people to get together for, you know, the purpose of expressing themselves in the community. So what are your thoughts on that?
So Commissioner Cummings, we went through and we looked at our largest rental community center, which was Ted C. Wills down here off of San Pablo, north of Belmont. And over a 3-4 year span, our highest rental was the gym. And over that 3 to 4 year span, we had 40 rentals, so average about 10 per year. We moved on down to the other classrooms and kitchens. And in all honesty, the numbers were relatively low as far as our rentals. We didn't have a lot of participation when it got down to renting of kitchens. I think we had 2 over that 4 year span. And then the actual community rooms, I think we had about 8 or 9 over that same span. So it's not a feature that's heavily used, but when it is, it's just a cost recovery method for us. So I believe we're pitching it was $37.50 if I'm not mistaken, and we're going up to $45. And we can bring that slide back up if need be.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that response.
You're welcome.
All right, before we vote, do we have any other commissioners that have any other questions in regards to this presentation? All right. Dr. Apuda, do you still motion for this presentation?
Yes, my motion stands.
Thank you. Is there a second?
The second was already made by Commission Member Vang.
Thank you. Can we conduct our roll call vote now, City Clerk?
Yes. Commissioner Parks?
Yes.
Commissioner Barraza?
Yes.
Commissioner Singh?
Yes.
Commissioner Cummings?
Yes.
Commissioner Apuda?
Yes.
Commissioner Vang?
Yes.
And Chair McCoy.
Yes. All right, it is 7:20. We will now adjourn the meeting and you guys enjoy the rest of your evening with your family and I see you at the next Parks, Recreation and Arts Commission meeting. Good night.
Good night.
Good night. Thank you.
Good night.
Good night.